In the forgotten stretch of the galaxy, on the desolate planet of Zaryan 5, a young alien girl opened her eyes to the bleak landscape that stretched endlessly around her. She lay amid the rubble of what appeared to be a crash site, the remnants of a spacecraft scattered and smoldering in the distance. The sky was a murky blend of orange and red, painting a harsh backdrop to the barren land. Her name was Leora, and her skin shimmered with an iridescent glow, a stark contrast to the dull, rocky surface she lay upon. Her memories were a jumbled mess, flashes of her family, her home, and then chaos. The last thing she remembered was being put into an escape pod as her planet was invaded by the relentless Drekars, creatures known for their ruthlessness and insatiable hunger for conquest. Leora struggled to her feet, her limbs weak and her mind foggy. Her senses, however, were sharp, tuned to the alien environment by her species' innate adaptability. She could hear the distant roars and growls of monstrous creatures, native to Zaryan 5, lurking beyond the horizon. The loneliness weighed heavily on her, but she knew she had to survive. Scanning the surroundings, Leora found remnants of survival gear among the debris: a tattered map, a half-broken communicator, and a water filtration unit. It wasn't much, but it was a start. She clung to the hope that someone might receive her signal, though she knew the odds were bleak. As she gathered the supplies, a sudden movement caught her eye. Hiding behind a large chunk of metal, she watched as a terrifying creature slinked into view. It was massive, with scales that seemed to deflect the dim sunlight and eyes that glowed with a menacing, predatory light. Leora held her breath, trying not to make a sound. The creature sniffed the air, its enormous head turning towards her hiding spot, and then, surprisingly, it moved on. Knowing she couldn't stay by the crash site, Leora set out to find shelter. The map showed a series of caves a few kilometers to the north, which seemed like her best bet for safety. As she trudged through the rugged terrain, her mind raced with questions. Why was she left here? What happened to her family? And could she find a way off this forsaken planet? The journey was treacherous. The ground occasionally trembled underfoot, a reminder that the planet was as alive as the creatures that inhabited it. With night approaching, the temperature began to drop drastically, a common occurrence on Zaryan 5, as her briefings had warned her. Just as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the land, Leora reached the mouth of a cave. It was dark and uninviting, but it promised some semblance of protection. She ventured inside, her steps cautious and her senses alert for any sign of danger. As she settled down to rest, her communicator buzzed faintly. Frantically, she grabbed it, a glimmer of hope rising in her chest. The screen flickered weakly, and then, clear as the starlight that began to peek through the planet's thin atmosphere, a message appeared. Signal received. Hold position. Help is on the way. Exhausted but relieved, Leora leaned back against the cold stone, her mind filled with thoughts of rescue. But as she drifted towards sleep, the reality of her situation remained clear. She was not safe yet. The night was long, and the monstrous creatures were most active under the cover of darkness. The real test of her survival had just begun. Leora's first night in the cave was fraught with haunting sounds that permeated the thin walls of her rocky refuge. Every howl and screech that echoed through the cavern's mouth sent a shiver down her spine. Despite her exhaustion, sleep was a fleeting visitor, punctuated by nightmares of monstrous eyes and looming shadows. As dawn crept over the horizon, Leora awoke to a silence that was almost more unnerving than the nocturnal cacophony. She ventured out of the cave, greeted by the light of a sun that seemed too weak to chase away the chill of the planet's night. With the communicator strapped securely to her belt, she decided to explore the surrounding area while awaiting the promised rescue. A thin mist hung low over the ground, and Leora could see her breath in the cold morning air. She moved cautiously, using the map to guide her to nearby landmarks that might offer resources or better shelter. Her first destination was a ridge outlined as a vantage point from which she could survey a wider area of the landscape. Climbing the steep incline, her muscles protested, still sore from the previous day's exertions. At the summit, Leora paused, taking in the panoramic view. From here, the planet seemed almost peaceful, its rugged beauty belying the dangers it harbored. She scanned the horizon, noting smoke rising in the distance, perhaps a sign of volcanic activity, or worse, another crashed vessel. Her attention was suddenly drawn to a rustling noise behind her. Spinning around, she found herself face to face with one of Zaryan's native creatures. It was smaller than the one from the night before, but no less daunting, covered in spiky armor and bearing a set of sharp teeth that gleamed in the morning light. Instinctively, Leora reached for the laser cutter from her belt. A tool meant more for excavation than combat, but it was all she had. The creature hesitated, its intelligent eyes assessing her stance. Leora stood her ground, and after a tense moment, the creature backed away, disappearing into the thick brush. Breathing a sigh of relief, Leora continued her survey of the area. She noted several paths that could be viable routes to explore, each leading to different geological features that might provide necessary resources. Deciding on the path that led to a reported water source, she marked her route on the map, her training as a xenogeologist giving her an edge in navigating and utilizing the alien terrain. Her trek was slow, hindered by the rough terrain and her need to remain vigilant. The landscape was a mix of towering rock formations and dense, thorny vegetation that seemed almost sentient in the way it moved with the wind. After several hours, Leora arrived at a cliff overlooking a valley where the map indicated a stream flowed. Descending towards the water, she found the stream to be a trickle rather than the flowing river she had hoped for. But it was enough. She used her filtration unit to collect drinkable water, filling her supplies. As she worked, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The wilderness of Zaryan 5 was alive in more ways than one, its inhabitants hidden yet always observant. With her water supply replenished, Leora decided to head back to the cave before dusk could bring more dangers. Her path back was marked by the occasional distant roar, a stark reminder that she was not alone on this planet. The communicator remained silent, a static-filled promise still unfulfilled as she navigated her way through the alien landscape, each step taking her further into the unknown depths of Zaryan 5. As night fell once again, Leora returned to the relative safety of her cave, her body weary but her mind restless with the day's encounters. She sorted through the supplies, checking her equipment and planning for the possibility that she might need to survive on this planet longer than she had initially hoped. Her attention was drawn to the communicator, which remained frustratingly silent. Fiddling with the device, she tried adjusting its settings, hoping to boost its signal. Suddenly the static crackled into a brief, garbled message. She caught only fragments. "Safe. Coordinates received. Stay." Before it faded out again. Leora's heart raced. The message was unclear, but it was the first sign that her signal had reached someone. With renewed urgency, she decided to attempt a repair on the communicator. The internal components were sophisticated, but not beyond her understanding, thanks to her technical training. As she carefully disassembled the device, she considered the possibility that she wasn't just stranded, she might be deliberately marooned. The thought was chilling, and she pushed it away, focusing on her immediate task. Hours slipped by as she worked under the dim light of her portable lamp. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she managed to stabilize the signal. The device lit up, and this time the voice that came through was clear. "This is Rescue Shuttle Theta 5 responding to your distress call. We are on approach, but your location shows high levels of atmospheric interference. We might have difficulty landing. Can you move to higher ground?" The message repeated, giving her a thread of hope. Leora checked her map, finding a peak several kilometers to the west that might offer a better reception point. It was risky moving in the dark, but waiting might mean missing her chance at rescue. She packed her essentials quickly, leaving behind anything that would slow her down. As she stepped outside, the nocturnal sounds of Zaryan 5 filled the air, more menacing under the cover of darkness. Every rustle and distant roar heightened her senses to near breaking. Leora moved with purpose, her path illuminated by the small beam of her flashlight. The terrain became increasingly treacherous as she ascended, the ground steep and littered with loose stones. More than once, she heard the sound of large creatures moving in parallel to her, their presence shadowy figures just beyond the light's reach. After a grueling hike, She reached the peak. The wind was stronger here, howling around her as she set up the communicator, adjusting its antenna towards the sky. She sent her coordinates through, and almost immediately the communicator buzzed. "Received your new location. Preparing for descent. Keep your signal active." Relief washed over Leora, tempered by the knowledge that the shuttle still had to make it through the dangerous atmosphere and land safely. She set up a small perimeter with her remaining equipment, creating makeshift alarms from wiring and metal scraps that would give her warning of approaching creatures. As she waited, she watched the sky, where the first hints of a spacecraft entering the atmosphere could be seen as a faint light against the star-filled darkness. Each minute stretched endlessly, filled with the tension of hope and the gnawing fear of what roamed just beyond the light. Leora stood guard over her makeshift camp, a lone figure against the vast, wild landscape of Zaryan 5, her eyes fixed on the sky and her hand on her laser cutter, ready for whatever came next. The minutes ticked by as Leora watched the spacecraft's descent, her heart pounding with each flicker of light that battled through the dense cloud cover of Zaryan 5. The ship was a beacon in the dark, a symbol of hope against the oppressive unknown of the planet. Suddenly, the night erupted in chaos. A deafening roar tore through the silence, and Leora spun around to face the source of the sound. Emerging from the shadows was a creature larger than any she had encountered so far. Its body was covered in thick armored plates, and its eyes glowed with a malevolent fire. The creature charged, and Leora leapt aside, narrowly avoiding a swipe from its massive claws. Scrambling to regain her footing, Leora grabbed her laser cutter and aimed it at the creature. The beam seared through the air, striking the creature's side. It roared in pain but did not falter in its advance. Realizing the cutter was too weak to deal significant damage, Leora searched desperately for another strategy. Her gaze caught on a large rock formation beside her. She sprinted towards it, the creature's heavy steps thundering behind her. With agility honed by her desperate situation, she climbed up the formation, reaching a precarious ledge. Below, the creature circled, searching for a way to reach her. From her elevated position, Leora could see the shuttle now, its lights cutting through the night as it fought against the planet's turbulent atmosphere. She signaled it with her flashlight, hoping the pilots could see her. Meanwhile, the creature below continued its assault on the rock, its powerful strikes sending vibrations up to where Leora stood. The shuttle seemed to hover, uncertain. Then, with a burst of speed, it made its final approach, landing a short distance away on a relatively flat expanse. The creature roared in frustration and turned towards the new arrival, intrigued and threatened by the shuttle. Seizing the moment, Leora descended from the rock formation, sliding and stumbling as she rushed towards the shuttle. The shuttle's door opened, and a figure in a pilot's uniform appeared, waving her in frantically. "Come on!" the pilot shouted over the roar of the engines and the creature. Leora sprinted the final distance, her lungs burning and her legs aching. Just as she reached the shuttle, the creature regained its focus and charged at her. The pilot, seeing the imminent danger, fired a flare gun at the creature. The bright burning light startled it, causing it to falter just long enough for Leora to leap into the shuttle. The door slammed shut behind her, and the pilot wasted no time, immediately lifting off. Leora collapsed to the floor, her breath ragged, her body shaking from the adrenaline and exertion. Through the shuttle's rear window, she watched as the creature receded into the distance, a shadow once more against the dim landscape of Zaryan 5. As the shuttle ascended, breaking free from the planet's grip, Leora sat up and looked around. The pilot turned to her, an expression of relief mixed with curiosity on his face. "That was close," he said, his voice steady despite the recent peril. "You're lucky we got to you in time." Leora nodded, her mind still reeling from the night's events. "Thank you," she managed to say, her voice hoarse. The pilot nodded, turning his attention back to the controls as they made their way into orbit. Away from the immediate danger, Leora allowed herself a moment to reflect. The planet below was a speck now, a dangerous and wild place that had tested her to her limits. Yet, as the adrenaline faded, a deep, unsettling thought lingered in her mind. Who had left her on that planet and why? The answer, she knew, was crucial, not just for her own peace of mind, but potentially for her very survival. As the stars stretched out before them, Leora felt the weight of her journey not ending, but beginning anew, with mysteries yet to unravel and dangers that might lie far beyond the alien terrain of Zaryan 5. Leora's thoughts raced as the shuttle climbed through the layers of atmosphere, the planet shrinking into a toxic bead below them. The sense of relief that should have enveloped her was eclipsed by a swirl of unresolved questions and deep-seated mistrust. She glanced at the pilot, whose focus remained locked on the instrument panel, his profile set against the starlit void. "What's your name?" Leora asked, her voice steadier now. The pilot glanced over, a slight smile breaking his stern concentration. "I'm Cal," he replied. "And you owe me one hell of a story, you know." Leora nodded, knowing her tale was as tangled and dangerous as the forests of Zaryan 5. "Maybe I do," she conceded. "But first, where are we headed?" "To the Orion station," Cal said as he made a few adjustments to the shuttle's trajectory. "It's a safe haven for now. We'll figure out your situation once we get there." As they transitioned from the planet's gravitational pull into the openness of space, Leora's gaze drifted to the viewport, watching the stars. The cosmos had always offered her a semblance of peace, a vastness so profound that her own troubles seemed momentarily insignificant. Cal noticed her absorption in the cosmic panorama. "First time seeing the stars from this angle?" he queried, a note of curiosity in his tone. "No," she responded softly, "but it feels like a lifetime since I last had the chance to appreciate them without fearing for my life." The shuttle was silent for a moment, save for the hum of its engines and the occasional beep from the dashboard. Cal then spoke up again, breaking the quiet. "You know, not many survive out there on Zaryan 5. You must be made of tough stuff." Leora turned from the window, her eyes meeting his. "Survival isn't just about being tough," she began, her thoughts drifting back to her narrow escapes. "It's about understanding the environment, knowing when to fight and when to run. And sometimes," she paused, a shadow crossing her features, "it's about the mysteries you carry with you." Cal nodded, seemingly understanding her implicit message. "We all have our mysteries, don't we?" he mused. "What's yours?" "I'm trying to figure that out," Leora admitted. "Someone wanted me gone, stranded on that planet. But who? And why?" "Well, Orion Station might help you unravel some of those knots. There are people there who owe me a few favors. We can dig around, see what comes up," Cal suggested, turning his attention back to the control panel as the shuttle neared the station. As the silhouette of Orion Station emerged against the backdrop of a nebula, its lights twinkling like a mirage in the vast desert of space, Leora felt a mix of anticipation and apprehension. The station was a nexus for drifters, traders, and those escaping the past, making it the perfect place to hide, or be found. Cal maneuvered the shuttle into the docking bay, the magnetic locks securing them with a thud that echoed through the hull. "We're here," he announced. "Ready to step into the fray?" Leora took a deep breath, gathering her resolve. "As ready as I'll ever be." Together they disembarked from the shuttle, stepping into the bustling energy of Orion Station. It was a sprawling complex, alive with the sounds of commerce and conversation. Aliens of various species mingled with humans, each going about their business with an urgency that spoke of lives too busy for introspection. Cal led the way through the throng, nodding at a few familiar faces. "First, we find you a safe place to stay," he stated, his voice barely audible over the clamor. "Then, we hunt for answers." As they navigated through the crowded corridors, Leora's senses were on high alert, her eyes scanning the faces around her. Among the crowd, she felt a piercing gaze on her, quick to vanish the moment she turned. Whether friend or foe, someone had taken an interest in her arrival. And as the maze of Orion Station enveloped them, Leora knew that her quest for answers would be fraught with more danger than she had faced on Zaryan 5. The mystery of her abandonment was just the beginning, and every step forward could draw her deeper into a web of interstellar intrigue. Navigating through the tangled corridors of Orion Station, Leora felt every stare, every whispered conversation as if they were directed at her. Cal seemed unconcerned, accustomed to the station's bustling nature, but to Leora, each shadow held a potential threat, each face a possible enemy. They arrived at a modest living quarter tucked away in a quieter sector of the station. The room was small, utilitarian, with just enough space for a bed and a small workstation. "You can stay here while we figure things out," Cal said, handing her a key card. "It's not much, but it's safe." Leora nodded, her mind racing with the implications of her new reality. As soon as Cal left, she secured the door and approached the window, peering out at the cosmic ballet of ships docking and departing. The station felt like a fortress in the void, yet she knew that no place was truly safe. Determined to uncover the truth, Leora set up her portable data terminal, connecting to the station's network. She began to sift through databases and public records, looking for anything that might hint at why she had been targeted. Her search was meticulous, guided by the faint trail of corporate espionage and shadowy dealings she remembered from her past life. Hours slipped into days as Leora pieced together fragments of information. She discovered that her own work as a xenogeologist had been pivotal in identifying valuable resources on uncharted planets, a fact that could make her both valuable and vulnerable. The deeper she dug, the more she realized her skills had likely entangled her in a web of greed far beyond her initial comprehension. During her investigations, Cal became an unlikely ally, providing her with access to restricted areas of the station and introducing her to key figures in the station's underbelly. With each new connection, Leora gathered allies and information, her quest slowly drawing a clearer picture of a sprawling conspiracy. One evening, as she returned to her quarters, Leora found a note slipped under her door. It was cryptic, containing only coordinates and a time. Someone wanted to meet. Her instincts screamed caution, but she knew this could be the break she needed. Equipped with her laser cutter for protection, Leora headed to the designated location, a derelict section of the station rarely frequented by its inhabitants. The corridors here were dimly lit, the air heavy with the echo of distant machinery. As she turned a corner, she came face to face with a figure shrouded in darkness. "Leora!" The figure spoke, stepping into the light. It was a woman, human, with piercing eyes and a calm demeanor. "You've been difficult to find." "And you are?" Leora asked, her hand tightening around her cutter. "I'm the reason you're alive. I sent you to Zaryan 5 not for death, but for protection," the woman explained, her voice even. "You discovered something others want desperately. Your research on bioluminescent minerals, it's not just scientific. It's power. It's weaponizable." Leora's heart raced, the pieces falling into place. "And you are?" "I work for an organization that safeguards sensitive information. We had to get you off the grid before they could eliminate you," the woman continued. "Why should I trust you?" Leora challenged, skepticism lacing her tone. "Because I'm offering you not just answers, but also protection," the woman said, pulling out a data chip and handing it to Leora. "This contains everything, your research, the parties interested in it, and how you can stay one step ahead." Leora took the chip, weighing her next steps. "What now?" "Now," the woman said, turning to leave. "You decide the future of your work. Use it wisely." As the woman disappeared into the shadows, Leora looked down at the data chip in her hand. Her past was no longer a mystery, but her future was hers to shape. With new allies and a newfound purpose, she prepared to navigate the dangerous waters of corporate espionage and interstellar politics. Her journey was far from over. It had evolved into a battle not just for survival, but for control of a power that could reshape the foundations of the galaxy.